You're listening to Consulting Logistics, presented by FreightPlus. I'm your host, Kyle McNaught. Thanks for checking us out. So one cool thing that we have here at FreightPlus is a lot of subject matter experts. And one of the really interesting things is how much they interact with what's happening in the industry. I, as the host of this podcast, try to bring my subject matter experts to be able to talk to you about what they're hearing. And one person that you've probably gotten to hear a lot from recently, due to how insane the Less-Than-Truckload mode has been, is my man, Gula. Chris, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, you know what? Can't complain. And not having the same struggles as one of our friends over there in the LTL. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting, right? We did a whole podcast a month or two back, all just about what's happening. We talk about LTL and the struggles that they're dealing with constantly in the market report. Again, for someone who maybe this is their first time, what's happening in LTL right now that's just so unique to what we normally see?
Right now, it's really the perfect storm. You're seeing a lot of different things come together, and LTL is kind of in the middle of that. You got capacity issues, on either sides of LTL. So you got truckload capacity issues, you got parcel capacity issues, and what ends up happening is LTL gets fed from the top and the bottom, right? So truckload usually carry or suppliers that ship truckload are cutting down their orders and maybe shipping smaller amounts and trying to force it into the LTL environment. And same thing with parcel, where the parcel operators can't handle it, so they're trying to push that into LTL. So you already got capacity issues in the LTL mode, and then it's basically getting sandwiched by the truckload and the parcel division as well.
Now, one thing that we've talked about in the past is really a lot of this comes down to a worker shortage. A lot of what we're hearing kind of everywhere is just like the need for employees. I mean, we're seeing it everywhere. LTL in particular gets hit pretty hard because when you think of workers, and especially in transportation, you think of a truck driver. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get we need more trucks. But LTL is a little more unique in that sense because of how much the cycle matters. Can you talk to me a little bit about that, or just what the big difference with LTL is compared to kind of that truckload and other modes that more or less kind of operate one person kind of getting there, moving everything, coming back?
Well, and the driver shortage is not unique to only LTL. It affects other modes as well. But again, LTL gets squeezed because you have less people entering the market, and you also had outside influence, the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, which took a lot of drivers out of the mix. The school closings, the external school closings that happened when the pandemic first hit, and these schools are just now opening up. And then in the LTL environment, it is a little more complex. You have more touches on the freight. It's a little more labor intensive than getting in a truck and going from point A to point B. You have consumer interaction. A lot of LTL carriers have their drivers also operate forklifts on the docks, and it's a 24-hour operation. So you have many different shifts. And nowadays, people don't want to be away from their families and missing, sporting events or kids' plays at schools or whatever that may be. So the LTL market's it's just not for everybody, and it's hard for the carriers to not only get new drivers in place, but to get applicants.
Now, you mentioned this a lot, especially in the market report. A lot of the thing you do with your job really is kind of being that in between for our clients and our prospects and what the LTL carriers are operating like. It's been very interesting, especially if you read our market reports. You mentioned a lot that like they've had job postings up and they're not getting that many people applying. Like, what are you hearing out in the field right now when it comes to kind of bringing the drivers on? What's occurring for LTL?
They're throwing all their resources at it right now, and they have been for several months. We've mentioned sign-on bonuses, retention bonuses, referral bonuses, increased wages. redesigning the network and offering more home time for employees so they're not away from their families as often. And just recently, since I talked to the carriers, they are starting to see a little bit of relief. It's getting a little better, but nowhere near where it needs to be to supplement the capacity issues and the volumes they're seeing. But, there are applicants at least coming in now where, 8, 10, 12 months ago, they weren't even seeing the applicants come in. So they're at least getting applicants, whether those, end up being hires and, replacements for people either leaving the industry or retiring. It's too soon to tell, but I was glad to hear recently that it's getting a little better.
That's good. You know what? We should be happy about that because we have not heard that type of stuff for a long time at this point. But that's awesome. That's a really, really, really good thing. But it's interesting, especially because the main reason I'm bringing it on here is because of a recent poll you actually did on LinkedIn, where something that you kind of were just like, oh man, it's been keeping me up at night, but kind of within, I'll state the poll because we can talk about the results and what you found from the poll, and kind of then we can shift it sort of to how can a company take this kind of information that you're seeing, especially because you're talking to kind of industry insider people. So like if this is what the industry is thinking, what should I be worried about? But you said will current freight volumes and driver/dock shortages push LTL carriers to lowering their hiring standards / drive down service quality? Now we're not saying this is absolutely going to happen. It's more of just, hey, what do you guys think? In our poll, I mean, you had a good amount of votes, and 57% said yes, that they think that it is kind of pushing people to a different measure. I mean, just based off of you've been in this industry forever, you kind of know how much people are willing to really show. Were you surprised by the results of your poll on LinkedIn?
I wasn't, just because of the necessity that the carriers have right now. And the poll came up, Kyle, just, I was thinking about it, and I was putting on my old operational hat, and I was in that office. I was at that hiring fair, many times in the past. And I was thinking, what would I do right now, as a position in charge, as a person in position to hire drivers? How would I attract them? How would I work with our recruiters? And would I lower my standards? Or would the human resources team, push something to us to lower our standards? And it was bothering me. I was thinking about it. So, that's why I put up the poll, and I'm not surprised by the results, because I think you're already seeing some of the things that we're talking about and what the poll was about, and the standards kind of lowering, or the expectations maybe going away a little bit.
So what are the expectations? I guess as someone who they never grew up in the industry or grew up in logistics or LTL like you did, what are some of the kind of normal expectations that the LTL kind of workers bringing in that you kind of are anticipating they might not automatically know this type of stuff, or it could take a little bit more time for them to kind of get to understanding this?
There's a couple levels, right? So you have carriers that have dock workers that only work the dock. A lot of them are part time. Some have full time dock workers, and then you have what they call combination employees that work the dock and are CDL holders. So they drive, whether that's making pickups and deliveries or drive over the road. And then you have companies that just have drivers. They do not work the dock. So there's a couple different levels there. And I think, a company's standards may have been, they have to have 3 years driving experience before we even bring them in for a in-person interview. Does that 3 years go down to 2 years? Does it go down to 1 year? Because of the desperation in getting people into the industry and attracting them. Does a dock worker have to have experience when they come on board, or can they can't be straight off another job that's not in the industry, and they train them, they do on hands training. So it's just what the qualifications are and what the company has set, whether or not they're willing to change that And like anything else, I'm sure there's lawyers and everybody else, the higher ranking officials get involved to see what the effect may be, positive or negative. So.
No, but is there, what's the difference? I guess help me understand like the difference of why you need 3 years of driving experience, or why you should have dock work experience to join the kind of the LTL. Is this all because of, like you've gotten to talk about, the cycle and how much everything really requires kind of constant churn and kind of everything working at a very efficient level?
Yeah, and we've talked about it on previous market reports and podcasts. It's a very sensitive industry. For one, like you said, to stay in cycle, everything has to be, has to flow smoothly. And any little hiccup in the operation can throw that off. You can have a late departure from St. Louis to Boston that's going to put that freight, possibly not delivering the next day, or on this, standard transit time. You have to look at concerns over injuries. If somebody that has less experience or less training is more susceptible to cause injuries or injure themselves. And you also have to look at a CDL driver who's less experienced. Are they going to have a vehicle crash? Are they going to be involved in something? So there's many layers, not just customer satisfaction and getting the product there on time, damage free, but you also have safety, major safety concerns as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking from a company's point of view of like, well, the service you're already kind of concerned about, but help me, what other type of implications kind of could occur with this type of, it's not like a shift. Again, we're not in any way saying that LTL is going to suffer tremendously because of this type of stuff. It's more or less like, hey, let's be proactive about it. So what are some implications that a company could start thinking about right now of like, hey, they've had to shift their standards so they can get more people in there, which could lead to some things down the line when it comes to LTL. What should I as a company be doing to kind of prepare myself for that?
Well, in the industry now, what we're recommending our clients to do anyway is more lead time. You want to build in more lead time because the transit days are becoming 1, 2, 3 days longer than what the published days are. Packaging, you can always do better packaging. That's gonna help if you have somebody that's a little bit less experienced handling your freight. The better it's packaged, you might reduce some damage that way. And then practice patience, I guess, is a big one, because the LTL industry is in a little bit of a turmoil right now, and it's going to stay that way for several more months, probably into 2022.
Now, one of the things you do for our clients is kind of help with the whole strategic carrier sourcing, or like RFPs and stuff like that. How important is that if you're going to go out to LTL? How important is like a really good RFP strategy, especially kind of understanding what's going to come up? Why does an LTL carrier look for kind of an in-depth one that really explains your operation?
You want to form a good partnership, right? You don't want, if it's only good for the carrier, then obviously the client is going to be suffering one way or another. If that's service levels aren't where they need to be, or the price is higher. And likewise for the carrier, it needs to be a good fit in their network. LTL, as we've talked about, is very sensitive, and it needs to fit in their network in lanes they need to freight and where they can remain efficient, while adding that additional revenue, in order not to hurt the bottom line and cause further delays and backlogs in a network that's already suffering too many of those.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's going to be interesting. I mean, we've spent so many hours, so many time just talking about the current situation, but like you're saying, it's like, okay, now time to start proactively thinking. Like here, we're starting to see what solutions are coming up, but it's time to really think, okay, how will this affect the bottom line? How will this affect transportation costs? How will things kind of change given this current environment we're in, and what's going to occur from it. Yeah, I mean, honestly, Gula, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Is there anything else, like something else that you think could be a potential kind of pay attention to right now? Because in the future, it's about to really come up, like stuff's about to start coming to roost.
Well, you made mention of one thing is rates increasing. It's on multiple layers, right? Discount discounts are higher, whatever it may be, accessorials that they are charged. You're seeing a lot of LTL carriers putting in changes for the accessorial charges that they apply. And some of these accessorial charges probably never hit some of these shippers before, but now the carriers are pushing it. Bottom line is the carriers cost is going up significantly. And I'm not talking just in fuel and the miles that they're putting in, just what we talked about earlier as far as increased wages, sign-on bonuses. They're all trying to get more equipment into their network. Unfortunately, the manufacturers, trailer manufacturers, tractor manufacturers can't keep up. So that's hurting. They're having to rent equipment because they can't get new equipment. So doing additional things as far as hiring fairs and job fairs and things like that cost money. The carrier's expenses are going up, and that needs to be passed along somewhere. And you're going to continue to see those rate increases.
How much of this is from COVID? Like I know we've talked about, like, we already had the aging workforce. We had a lot of this stuff. Like, how it's interesting because you kind of were like, okay, well, or is this a temporary thing, or is this is where the industry was heading? Costs were going to go up no matter what happened. We could still be 2019, no virus, no nothing, and this was going to be something we were hearing about, or is it no? COVID really did play a accelerative factor in the issues.
I think that's a perfect way to describe it. It was already there. It just accelerated a little bit, made it worse. The volume when COVID first came on the scene, volume dropped significantly. Manufacturing plants shut down. LTL carriers volumes went down. Shipment counts went down. Tonnage went down. And LTL being sensitive, like we've mentioned several times, they had to cut some labor costs out of it. They didn't have the volume they needed to support the current workforce they had. So they had. So they either furloughed employees, did voluntary layoffs, did mandatory layoffs, whatever that may be, and that was a direct result of COVID. And then the problem is when the volume started coming back, these employees necessarily didn't come back. They either found jobs elsewhere in a different industry or with a different company. So COVID definitely was an accelerant to an already, an already outlying issue that was there.
Yeah, no, it's in like you said, I think the cost wise, it's going to be there, but it's to me something that stood out when you kind of mentioned the idea of like I can never say that word, chargebacks that they never saw before. You could see with the not unqualified, but the underqualified kind of applicant that's like running the docks now or being a part of that type of stuff could miss the things, like especially like you say, it's all relationship. I mean, we talk about this so many times, but this is why it's valuable to have a good working relationship with your carriers.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point, Kyle. We've been talking a lot about drivers and dock workers. This goes to the management level as well. Will the carriers have to be forced to lower their standards when they get to the operational management level, the supervisors that are running the docks and supervising those dock workers and drivers? So it's right now it's all over the board, and the carriers are stuck trying to figure it out. And keep in mind, due to the volume and the capacity, all the carriers are attempting to expand right now, whether that's expand existing facilities, build new facilities, and that costs a lot of money, especially with the way real estate is nowadays. That costs a lot of money too. So the costs are going up for the carriers, and of course that's going to be pushed down to someone else.
Yeah, it always got to be pushed down, right? So
We see it at the grocery store right now, you know.
Yeah, wonderful. Man, this podcast is so pessimistic. It's like one of those like you want to be like, oh, it's good, but oh man, some things really stink. Chris, I think one of the coolest things is something people really should do is follow you on LinkedIn or connect with you. You're doing a great job at kind of just talking. It's more or less what you hear, like, right? Every day you're out there, you're talking to LTL carriers, and you're able to sort of explain like, hey, this is what I heard, this is a concern they have, and it's valuable. I mean, it's something that anyone working operations in a company should be listening to. Hey, I don't have the time to pick up the phone and have this many conversations. You're constantly talking to carriers. What's the best way people can kind of get in touch with you other than following you on LinkedIn? Chris Gula, Gula. What's another way that they can get in touch with you?
Email cgula, cgula at freightplus.io.
Absolutely. Chris, man, I know this is a short but sweet one, but there's so much people really should be paying attention to. And like you said, like get your stuff aligned. Like this is a time to really make sure you have some strong connections. They know who you are. You're getting your freight in a way that you completely understand it. When you're sending it out for RFP or something like that, they know what they're getting. It's not going to be a surprise. It's something that works for their network.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, Gula, have a good day.
You too. Thank you, Kyle.
And that's our show. Apologize about the kind of glitchiness of the video. I'm trying out a new system, so apologies all around. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel and be sure to share it with a friend. Thanks for watching Consulting Logistics. I'm Kyle McNaught. Rock and roll.